Thank you. Well, thank you so very much. This award means so much to me because Upton Sinclair has been someone I've admired for so long, for his tenacity, integrity, courage, and willingness to expose the injustices committed by the most powerful among us. We are grateful to Liberty Hill for this recognition and hope that our films, like Sinclair's books, can help bring about a more humane and compassionate society. Thank you.
I wrote a little longer speech, but before I start, I just want to thank Sarah Pillsbury, Liberty Hill, all the people, thank you for this honor. And all the people that came here tonight to honor us, who are our dear friends, and some of you who worked on the film. I know Thad, Bonnie, Jessica are here, Bonnie Greenberg, and we just deeply appreciate all of your support. We couldn't have done anything with all of you behind us, so thank you. So now I'm going to talk. The 19th century writer George Eliot once wrote, "If we had a keen vision and feeling of all of human life, we should die of that roar which lies on the other side of silence." When I was 16 years old, I came home from high school and found a large, dark brown manila binder on my bed. I opened the binder and found there was a play inside that was written by my father. Now, my father was a man of few hobbies, and those that I knew of most certainly did not include theater or creative writing. So the appearance of this manila binder was something of a surprise. The play was entitled "If I Were God." About 80 pages long, it told the story of a group of boys taking turns peeking through a small crack in a curtain so they could watch their mothers await their fate in a selection line in a concentration camp. Now, I knew growing up that my dad was a survivor, but that's all I knew. It was something that was never mentioned in our house. It was something he had never once spoken to me about. I thought of this the other day because I did an interview for the press in Australia, and the journalist said to me, "Why do you do what you do?" And I actually was stumped. I didn't know what to say, which I know is a surprise for a Jewish woman, talky Jewish woman like me. I didn't know how to respond, and then I thought, well, why doesn't anyone do what I do, and shouldn't everyone? And then I thought about the play. My father chose to share with me something very important about his childhood for the first time when I was 16 and he was 50. This was, he later told me, because when he was liberated, he found that no one wanted to hear what he had gone through. And when he did try and tell them, they didn't believe him. So he buried his pain and transmuted his sadness and silence into acts of compassion. This play was his belated and long suppressed testimony, its pages passively awaiting their reader, daring not to impose themselves too indelicately on anyone. This was his way of ever so quietly, but determinedly bearing witness. For me, it was his deafening roar. In 2006, Kirby and I read an article online in a journal called Salon. It spoke about a handful of women who were victims of a similar crime while serving in our military. I called up the reporter and asked her if the story had been picked up and gone wider. She said, much to her surprise, it hadn't. No one, she said, wanted to hear about it. No one was very interested. So we started doing our own research and learned that every day in our US military, according to DoD estimates, 49 women and men are sexually assaulted. Not overseas, not in the line of combat, not by the enemy, but right here on American soil, in the line of duty by their fellow soldiers. And when these women would step up in good faith to report these crimes, they more often than not were disbelieved, themselves blamed, and encouraged to stay silent so that the institution and its commanders could maintain an unblemished facade. and so they attempted to bury their pain, return to work confusedly beside their assailants, until more often than not they would implode, not from the trauma of the assaults themselves, but from the violence of the silence that was imposed upon them, from their inability to speak and share, to be heard and believed by their peers and community. After about a good year plus of our not being able to receive funding to make a movie about this topic, Kirby and I just traveled around the country ourselves with a camera and no crew to meet and talk with survivors. Their stories were harrowing and heartbreaking, each one uncannily echoing the other, even though these men and women were all from different branches and served at different times in different parts of our country. I remember leaving the house of a woman in upstate New York, Teresa, now 40, who had entered the Army when she was just 19. After telling me her story as I was leaving, she said, "Amy, even if you don't make this documentary, or even if you make it and I'm not in it, thank you so much for coming today to talk with me. You're the first person who's ever believed me." When Kirby and I finished Invisible War, we undertook a large outreach campaign seeking to raise awareness about the issue. And so we began screening the film at university campuses. At each campus we screened, someone would come up to us from the audience and say, "You know, actually, this happened to me right here at Bowdoin, right here at Dartmouth, right here at Harvard," pointing out that what we saw going on in the military was analogous to what they'd experienced on their campuses. And then we started getting letters in our inboxes. "Dear Ms. Ziering, dear Mr. Dick, will you please do a film on what's going on our campuses? I just watched Invisible War." No one seems to be listening. So although we both were fully engaged on working on another project, we pivoted and embarked on making a film which was released called The Hunting Ground, an expose of the rape epidemic on our campuses, chronicling and capturing in real time the student movement that has arisen to call it out and try and stem its proliferation. The combination of courageous survivors speaking up in Invisible War and The Hunting Ground, the work of students and activists and advocates, has led to the beginnings of a profound cultural shift. The blame for rapes in our culture is, for the first time in our lifetime, being placed first on perpetrators and not victims. The public is listening, and I do think, we all can take credit for the Bill O'Reilly change. I mean, that would not, right? I mean, that's been going on for decades and has actually been documented in press for decades, and yet now it finally got traction. And I think it's due to the credit of what all of us have done in the last 5 years. What's so interesting to me about the genesis and genealogy of this narrative, how a small story in an online journal led to an expose by a team of filmmakers, which in turn led to a second expose because of people having watched the first film and then demanding it, is that it so powerfully speaks to what all of you are doing right here at Liberty Hill and has brought us here together tonight. You are here because you know that stories of inequities and violence matter, and that it's our obligation and our duty to listen, even when that listening is painful and unpleasant, and to speak up even when that speaking up requires courage, even when it's easier to turn away or elect to remain silent. You all are supporting work that knows the importance and power of both bearing witness and speaking out. You are even doing so today by gathering here to listen to us speak tonight. It's March 2016, and I'm in a public movie theater in Cambridge. The Hunting Ground has just finished screening, and people are lining up to talk with us after the Q&A. A young girl, barely 18, is standing on the periphery, awkwardly hanging back. At the behest of the usher, I ultimately leave the theater and I head out to the lobby where I'm newly accosted by people. She belatedly follows and waits, watching me from afar as I field more queries, and then patiently waits some more, hovering ever so hesitantly as I now catch up with a college acquaintance who suddenly makes a surprise appearance. At long last, I'm alone. She walks a long diagonal and approaches. We are now face to face. She looks at me. I look at her. And she says, nothing. I wait. Still, nothing. Another minute. And then I understand. I understand what I now know I must have recognized when I first saw her hovering like Banquo's ghost in the theater's corner. I understand so much. I understand an eternity of silence, and I hear its thundering and persistent roar. Finally, I say the only thing that comes to mind, which is, it's going to be okay. I promise you it will. She shakes her head, and she starts to cry. And we hug a long time, and I start to cry too. I cry for my father. I cry for the college sophomore who brought her teddy bear to our interview. And when she told me she didn't want to tell her parents because she didn't want them to be sad, saw that I was sad and asked me if I wanted to keep it. I cry for all the women and men I met with and spoke these past 5 years who were met with silence, blame, and derision when all they did was report a crime in order to stop it from happening to someone else. I cry for this haunting stranger who simply could not speak. Thank you for doing the work you do at Liberty Hill. Thank you for being there for those who cannot or dare not speak. And most of all, thank you for listening to those listening compassionately to those when they do, and for hearing the roar behind their tears when they are silent. Thank you.